Recently, armor removal abilities have been changed quite dramatically. To bring you up to speed, I'll show you what armor removal options exist in today's Warframe and what you need to be wary of in each case. I'm Nick Engineer, let's solve a practical problem. Enemy armor can get to some pretty ridiculous levels. A weapon which can deliver 4,136 damage to an unarmored target then only does 65 damage to a high level armored unit. That's why it's extremely useful to have a way to reduce or even remove that armor as part of your kit. Luckily, there are many ways to do this. You can use Heat and Corrosive status procs, armor reducing weapon mods, a certain compatibility, the Corrosive Projection Aura, Unari's Caustic Strike, and 17 Warframe abilities. Given there are so many options, let's break them down by how they work. Broadly speaking, there are 4 ways these options can reduce armor. There's a % reduction based on current values, % reduction based on maximum values, a flat reduction before level scaling, and a flat reduction after level scaling. Only one option in the game reduces armor by a flat amount after level scaling, and that is Mag's Polarize ability. It removes an amount of armor up to 400 multiplied by her strength from each affected enemy. So with neutral stats, if the enemy has 400 or less armor, then it's all gone. If instead they have 20,000 armor, you'll find you've done very little. To give you some perspective, every 300 armor effectively increases the damage an enemy can take by 100%. At 300 armor, they can take twice as much damage as they could at 0 armor before dying. At 600 armor, that's now 3 times as much, 900 armor 4 times as much, and so on. One of the most common Grineer units, an Elite Lancer, at the start of the Steel Path will have 6,148 armor, surviving over 21 times as much damage than if its armor was removed. Taking 400 from 6,148 isn't going to get you very far. On the plus side, this reduction is permanent and stackable, so you can keep removing armor this way until nothing is left. This brings us on to the flat reductions before level scaling. You may have seen the mod Shattering Impact and Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger and wondered how they could ever be useful. After all, if a normal Grineer unit on Steel Path is going to have over 6,000 armor, what use could removing 6 armor be? The trick is that these 2 mods remove directly from the base armor the unit would have at its minimum level. If we open up the codex, we can see the Elite Lancer actually has a base of only 200 armor. Removing 6 from that is permanently removing 3% of their maximum armor with every hit, regardless of the level. It will always take 34 hits to fully remove the armor of an Elite Lancer when you're using Shattering Impact or Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger. Only 17 hits if you use both of them at the same time. It's not instant, but it is at least a permanent debuff. Naturally, different enemies need a different number of hits to get to their chewy unarmored core. This even works on some enemies which resist other forms of armor removal, such as Eidolons, allowing you to bypass damage resistance in unusual means. However, as this is removing armor from the base value before level scaling, it stacks multiplicatively with armor reductions that remove a percentage of the armor. If you halve the armor of an enemy with an ability, and then halve their base armor with Shattering Impact, the enemy will still have 1/4 of their maximum armor left. Moving on to the percent reductions, reducing armor by a scaling amount, we've got both current armor reductions and max armor reductions. For current armor, that's primarily used in Heat and Corrosive status effects. Heat removes up to 50% of current armor, taking a couple seconds to fully kick in. So if the enemy had 6,000 armor, a Heat proc will bring that down to 3,000 armor, nearly doubling the damage the enemy will take. If the enemy's armor had already been reduced down to 3,000 by a different means, the Heat proc will only remove a further 1,500 armor. Additional Heat procs do not remove more armor, but they do refresh the duration of the effect. Likewise with Corrosive, it removes an amount of armor based on the number of corrosive status effects applied. It starts at 26% removed and increases by 6% for every additional proc, up to a max of 80% armor removed. Once again, this is only based on the current armor value. An enemy reduced from 6,000 armor to 3,000 armor by other means would then lose up to 2,400 armor from up to 10 simultaneous corrosive procs. If you use Heat and Corrosive at the same time, their effects multiply together for a maximum 90% of current armor reduction. Now for both Heat and Corrosive effects, they wear off once the status duration runs out. Heat's bonus fades over a few seconds after the status itself runs out, while the Corrosive status lasts 2 seconds longer, but the bonus instantly fades when the status effect runs out. Current armor reduction is also found in one Warframe ability, Gauss's Thermal Sunder. It's a combo setup, requiring you to also have Redline active. With that up, casting both Heat then Cold, or Cold then Heat, will reduce current enemy armor permanently equal to your battery level. This doesn't stack with itself, but you can apply a higher permanent drain if your battery level is higher on a later cast. Seeing as how almost every other ability doesn't work this way, this could possibly be a bug. If it does change, I'll try to catch it and pin a comment about that. Still, the most widespread form of armor reduction is a percent reduction based on the maximum value. Sharpened Claws on Kvat's, the Corrosive Projection Aura, Unairo's Caustic Strike, and 15 Warframe abilities all use this method of reducing armor. As they all reduce armor from the max amount an enemy has, these debuffs all add together. For example, Corrosive Projection with Coaction Drift reduces enemy armor by slightly more than 20%. If you then hit an enemy with an unmodded Tharos Strike, you remove a further 50% armor, bringing the total to just below 30% remaining. Then a Kvat using an unranked Sharpened Claws could remove the rest of the armor in one go. That's not an efficient way to do it, but it's just for demonstration. It doesn't matter in what order or combination you use these maximum percent removal options, so long as the total reaches minus 100% or lower, the enemy armor is completely gone. When it comes to the many Warframe abilities, they each are quite different. I'll show you here a quick summary of those different abilities. They each have different base values, some affect specific targets or a cone in front of you, while some affect a sphere around you or a sphere around a point you cast it on. Now I'll save you the trouble of memorizing or screenshotting all of this. The images themselves will be accessible for free over on my Patreon, so I'll link to that in the video description. Of course, I'm sure plenty of you want to know how much strength you'll need to fully armor strip with each of the 13 abilities that can do it in just one cast. That includes how much strength you need when combined with the Corrosive Projection Aura, whether you're alone or in a squad of people. Likewise, we've also got the values for how much strength you'll need when the auras are buffed by Coaction Drift. This is assuming that everyone who brings the aura brings the drift mod. How you go about achieving the strength needed for these full strips will of course be different from frame to frame, build to build, and situation to situation, but these are the limits that you need to be reaching in each case. Now there is some weirdness to many of these abilities beyond the summary tables I've just shown you. Ash's Seeking Shuriken armor strip, despite having automatic targeting of enemies in front of you, applies the armor strip to the first thing each shuriken hits. This means if you target an enemy through an obstacle, they take damage, but they don't lose armor. Likewise, if you target two enemies, one in front of another, both daggers might hit the front enemy and apply the armor strip twice without applying any armor strip to the one behind it. So for best results with Ash, you must get a clear shot. Likewise, Ember's Fire Blast and Hildren's Pillage both require line of sight to work as well. Ember's Fire Blast is also tied to strength in an odd way. On her, it has a base 50% strip, rising to 100% with full charge on her Immolation ability. If you have less than 100% strength, the minimum and maximum strip go down proportionally. However, there's no boost to the armor strip for above 100% strength. The same is true when subsumed, giving a flat 75% armor strip for 100% or more strength, and proportionally reduced with lower strength. On a different note, both Vauban and Grendel armor strip over time. However, because Grendel cannot consume units with Overguard, he cannot strip their armor until the Overguard is gone. Vauban's Bastille, however, will drain armor from Eximus units even though it cannot suspend them, so long as they fit into the maximum affected enemy count. Also strange is that Necros's Terrify stacks on enemies despite being a temporary armor strip. Ash's Seeking Shuriken also does this, but Nyx's Psychic Bolts, Trinity's Abating Link, and Zaku's Gaze ability all do not stack with themselves, whether cast by the same player or a different one. Trinity's Abating Link in fact has anti-synergy. Despite allowing multiple Trinities to link to the same enemy, the game seems to only consider the Abating Link debuff from the first linked Trinity, even if a second Trinity has a higher strength stat. And then we have Unairo's Caustic Strike. Granted, it's an operator ability, not a Warframe one. Even then, it still finds time to be weird in that the effective radius of the ability is much larger than the visual effect. All this strangeness aside, armor removal options have become a lot stronger and is very accessible. If the Warframe you are using doesn't come with an armor removal ability, and you don't want to use your operator for it, you can still look to the Helminth system. Ash, Ember, Hildren, Necros and Stylax all grant their armor removal abilities through Helminth. Ash, due to requiring an augment and only affecting 2 enemies within line of sight, isn't a good pick. Ember provides a simple 75% armor strip, but it cannot reach 100% in a single cast, and also still needs line of sight. Hildren's defense strip is very weak compared to most, and again requires line of sight, but at least it does also restore your shields. Necros offers a base 60% strip, which can be modded to 100%, in addition to sending enemies fleeing. The flee aspect may be positive, but sometimes may also be a negative, like when you're farming enemies for resources or trying to do a quick defense mission. And then Stylax's ability offers a middle ground 50% armor strip, along with self-healing and no line of sight restrictions. However, that ability is not cast in a full sphere around you, and also requires you to have a Stylax to give to the Helminth system. Compared to many Warframes, it can take a while for players to have a spare Stylax in the first place, unless you're willing to drop some platinum. So all told, everything has its pros and cons, but at the very least, I hope this gives you a broad understanding of the armor strip options you have, and how they interact since the Veilbreaker update. If you found this video helpful, or learned something new, then make sure to subscribe to catch more as it goes live. That's all from me for now though, so as always, cast abilities, strip armor, and fight well, Tenno.